The October afternoon carried the crisp promise of winter as mourners gathered at St. Matthew's Cemetery. Grace Hartwell sat in the front row of folding chairs, her 3-month-old daughter Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms. The white lace dress she wore had been her wedding dress altered hastily the night before, the only formal clothing she owned that still fit after giving birth. At 26, Grace had never imagined she would be burying her husband. Michael had been 32 strong and healthy, with calloused hands from his work as a carpenter, and dreams of building their family a home with his own 2 hands. The heart attack had come without warning, swift and merciless, leaving Grace with a newborn baby and a mountain of medical bills that had consumed their modest savings. The funeral service had been simple, held at the small Methodist church, where she and Michael had been married just 2 years earlier. Grace had paid for it with the last of their emergency fund, choosing the least expensive options, while trying to maintain some dignity for the man who had loved her so completely. The pastor spoke the final words over Michael's grave. Grace felt the weight of eyes upon her. Michael's family, his mother Patricia, his brother Stephen, and Stephen's wife Linda sat stiffly in the row behind her. They had never approved of Michael's marriage to Grace, a waitress from the wrong side of town. Patricia Hartwell had made her feelings clear from the beginning. Her son deserved better than a girl with no family money, no connections, no proper upbringing. When the service ended and people began to disperse, Grace remained seated, holding Emma close and trying to find the strength to say her final goodbye. She wasn't ready to leave Michael here, wasn't ready to face the empty apartment and the bills that would soon come due. Grace. Patricia's voice was sharp, cutting through the gentle murmur of departing mourners. We need to talk. Grace looked up to see her mother-in-law standing beside her, flanked by Stephen and Linda. Their expressions were cold, businesslike. Of course, Grace said quietly, adjusting Emma's blanket. What is it? It's about the baby. Patricia said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to getting her way. She belongs with family now. Real family. Grace felt her heart constrict. She is with family. She's with her mother. You're 26 years old, with no job, no money, and no prospects. Stephen interjected, his voice echoing his mother's disdain. We can provide for Emma. We can give her opportunities, education, a proper life. She has a proper life with me, Grace said, her voice growing stronger despite the tremor in her hands. I'm her mother. Michael would never have wanted. Michael isn't here, Linda interrupted. And frankly, if you truly cared about that child's welfare, you'd do what's best for her instead of being selfish. Grace stood slowly, Emma still cradled in her arms. Around them, the cemetery was nearly empty now, just a few groundskeepers in the distance, and the sound of cars departing. I need you to leave, Grace said quietly. This is my husband's funeral, and I need time to our son's funeral, Patricia corrected sharply. And we won't be leaving. In fact, we've already spoken to our attorney. We're filing for custody of Emma. Given your financial situation and your background, we're confident the court will see reason. The words hit Grace like a physical blow. She had known Patricia disapproved of her, but she had never imagined this level of cruelty, especially on the day they were burying Michael. What you can't, Grace whispered. She's my daughter. We can and we will, Stephen said. You have 48 hours to consider signing custody over voluntarily. If you don't, we'll pursue it through the courts. And I promise you that will be much more expensive and much more public than you want. Grace felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of these people. Get away from me. she said, her voice carrying a strength she didn't know she possessed. "Get away from my husband's grave." "Come, hun," Patricia said to her son and daughter-in-law. "There's no reasoning with her. She'll learn soon enough." As they walked away, Grace's legs gave out. She sank to her knees beside Michael's fresh grave, Emma beginning to fuss in her arms. The reality of her situation crashed over her like a wave alone broke, and now facing a custody battle she couldn't afford to fight. She tried to comfort Emma, but her hands were shaking too badly. The baby's cries grew louder, and Grace felt panic rising in her chest. She was failing already, couldn't even calm her own child. Maybe Patricia was right. Maybe Emma would be better off. "Excuse me." The voice was gentle, concerned. Grace looked up through her tears to see a man in his early 50s approaching carefully. He wore a well-tailored black suit and had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His silver hair was neatly combed, and he carried himself with quiet dignity. "I'm sorry to intrude," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I couldn't help but notice you seemed distressed. I'm Dr. Benjamin Wright. I was here visiting my wife's grave when I heard raised voices." Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. "I'm fine," she said automatically, though her voice betrayed her. "Doctor," Wright glanced at the fresh grave, reading the headstone. "Michael Hartwell." He was young. His voice carried the gentle compassion of someone who understood loss. "I'm very sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Grace managed, rocking Emma gently as the baby continued to cry. "May I ask Dr. Wright?" Hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Those people who were just here, they seem to be causing you distress on what should be a day of mourning." Grace looked into his face and saw only genuine concern. There was something about his presence that reminded her of her late grandfather, a man who had been the only stable figure in her chaotic childhood. "They're my husband's family," she said quietly. "They want to take my baby away from me." Dr. Wright's expression darkened with quiet anger. "On the day of your husband's funeral." Grace nodded, unable to speak, past the lump in her throat. "What's your name, dear?" he asked gently. "Grace. Grace Hartwell." "And this is Emma." "It's nice to meet you both, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Dr. Wright moved closer, his presence somehow calming Emma's cries. "Would you mind if I asked what their reasoning is for wanting custody?" Grace felt embarrassed discussing her financial situation with a stranger, but something about Dr. Wright's manner made her feel safe. "They say I can't provide for her, that I don't have money or proper breeding." Dr. Wright was quiet for a long moment, and Grace could see the wheels turning in his mind. "Grace, forgive me if this seems presumptuous, but I'm a retired pediatrician. I spent 40 years caring for children, and I can tell you something with absolute certainty. What matters most for a child isn't money or social status. It's love, and I can see in the way you hold your daughter that she is deeply loved." Grace felt fresh tears coming. But maybe they're right. Maybe I can't give her what she needs. "May I tell you something?" Dr. Wright asked gently. "My wife Sarah and I were never able to have children of our own. We spent decades watching families, and I learned that the best parents aren't the ones with the most resources. They're the ones with the biggest hearts. Your daughter is lucky to have you." Emma had quieted now, seeming to respond to the peaceful energy Dr. Wright brought with him. "I have a proposition," he continued. There's a law firm in town, Jameson and Associates. They specialize in family law, and they're very good. I'd like to pay their retainer for you." Grace's eyes widened. "I couldn't possibly." "You're not asking," Dr. Wright said with a gentle smile. "I'm offering. Consider it an investment in justice. No child should be separated from a loving parent out of spite." But why, Grace asked, overwhelmed by this stranger's kindness. "You don't even know me." Dr. Wright was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to a nearby headstone. "My wife Sarah died 3 years ago, cancer. In her final weeks, she made me promise something. She said that since we never had children to leave our money to, I should find ways to help other people's children. She believed that kindness was the only thing that mattered in this world." Grace felt tears streaming down her face. Not tears of despair this time, but tears of overwhelming gratitude. "There's something else," Dr. Wright continued. "I live in a large house that's far too empty these days. I have a guest cottage on my property that I've been thinking of renting out. If you're interested, the rent would be very reasonable and it would give you a safe place to raise Emma while you get back on your feet." Grace stared at him in disbelief. "I don't understand. Why would you do this for a complete stranger? Because Sarah would have," he said simply. "And because sometimes when we're at our lowest point, that's exactly when grace finds us. Your name suits you, by the way. You've shown tremendous grace under pressure." Today, over the following weeks, Dr. Wright proved to be as good as his word. The lawyers at Jameson and Associates took Grace's case and quickly discovered that Patricia Hartwell's threats were largely bluff. Her financial advantage meant little when weighed against Grace's clear fitness as a mother and her legal rights as Emma's parent. The guest cottage Dr. Wright had offered was a charming 2-bedroom home with a small garden and a peaceful view of the lake. The rent he charged was nominal, barely enough to cover utilities. He claimed it was because he enjoyed having someone nearby, but Grace suspected his motivations were far more generous. Dr. Wright became a fixture in their lives, not intrusive, but quietly supportive. He would stop by with groceries. He claimed he'd bought too much of or offer to watch Emma when Grace needed to run errands. He never overstepped, never tried to replace Michael's role in their lives, but simply provided the steady presence of someone who cared. When Emma took her first steps, it was across Dr. Wright's living room where Grace had been having their weekly Sunday dinner when she spoke her first word, "Mama." Dr. Wright's eyes filled with tears of joy, as if she were his own granddaughter. Grace found work as a bookkeeper for a local construction company's skills she had learned in community college years earlier. The job paid well enough to support her and Emma, and she began to rebuild the life that had seemed impossible just months before. The custody threat from Patricia Hartwell evaporated quickly once the lawyers became involved. Faced with the reality of a legal battle she was unlikely to win, Patricia retreated, though she never acknowledged her cruelty or attempted to make amends. 2 years later, Grace had saved enough money to put a down payment on a small house of her own. When she told Dr. Wright about her plans to move, he surprised her with his reaction. "I'm going to miss having you and Emma nearby," he said, and she could see that he genuinely meant it. "But I'm so proud of how far you've come." "Michael would be proud too. I'll never be able to repay you for what you've done for us," Grace said. Emma toddling around Dr. Wright's garden, chattering happily to his cat. "You already have," he replied. "You've let an old man feel useful again. You've given me the joy of watching Emma grow. And most importantly, you've shown me that Sarah's belief in kindness was right. It really is the most important thing in the world. On the day Grace moved into her new home, Dr. Wright arrived with a housewarming gift, a framed photo of Michael holding newborn Emma taken just days before his death. Grace had thought the photo was lost in the chaos of those difficult months. "I asked the photographer to make me a copy," he explained. "I thought Emma should have this so she can see how much her father loved her." Grace hugged him tightly. This man who had become the grandfather Emma would never have otherwise. The father figure Grace had never known she needed. Years later, when Emma was old enough to understand, Grace would tell her about the day they met Dr. Wright, about how kindness had found them at their darkest moment, how a stranger had seen worth in them when others saw only problems to be solved. "The world can be cruel sometimes," Grace would tell her daughter, "but it's also full of people like Dr. Wright, people who choose kindness over judgment, who see possibilities instead of problems. When you grow up, I hope you'll be that kind of person too." Emma, now a confident young woman, would always smile at this story. She had grown up knowing Dr. Wright as her honorary grandfather, the man who taught her to ride a bike and helped with her math homework. To her, his kindness wasn't extraordinary. It was simply how the world should work. But Grace never forgot the lesson of that October afternoon at the cemetery. She learned that sometimes when our world seems to be crumbling around us, grace really does find us. It comes in the form of strangers who choose to see our humanity rather than our circumstances, who offer help without judgment, who believe in our capacity for resilience even when we can't see it ourselves. And in return, we have the opportunity to pass that grace forward, to be the unexpected kindness in someone else's darkest hour, to prove that love, not money, not status, not breeding, is what truly makes us family.